Tonight on Primetime Politics, failing to get a lift.
Our fiscal plan is sustainable and responsible.
As Liberals sell their budget, a new poll says the party continues to lose public support. We'll speak to the housing minister about his government's plan to tackle affordability, generational fairness, and housing, and why the Liberal plan is failing to inspire Canadians. Also, the expanded Trans Mountain Pipeline is now in operation. Premier Danielle Smith will tell us why she thinks this is a game changer. Plus, we'll discuss the wisdom of investing in a multi-billion-dollar project as the world looks for greener options. And it's the first day for the National Dental Care Program. Nearly 2 million seniors have signed up, but only a few thousand dentists have agreed to provide care. Why aren't more willing to participate? This is Primetime Politics. Hello, everyone. I'm Michael Serapio. The federal budget is before the House of Commons this evening, but even before MPs voted on the bill, Canadians seem to have already passed their own judgment on the Liberal plan. The latest voting intentions put out by the Leger Group today have Conservatives building their lead over Liberals by another 2 points, now standing at 44%, Liberals at 23%, the NDP at 17%, and the Bloc at 8%. Now, in an interview with the National Post, Leger Vice President Andrew N says he did not think the Liberals would slip more and, quote, the glass half empty perspective would be that the budget missed the mark, while the glass half full would be that the budget is going to take a while to penetrate into the opinion and work its way in terms of improving the fortunes of the government. Well, with that, we're happy to have on the program this evening Sean Fraser, the Housing Minister. Minister, thank you for joining us.
It's a pleasure to be with you. Thank you for having me.
So, jumping off that poll, Minister, so much of your government's focus since Parliament's return in September has been on housing, and yet you see these poll numbers, your party is still trailing badly. Why do you think your government's push to convince Canadians that you care about affordability concerns like housing is failing?
Well, let's just be clear about what we're trying to achieve. It's not to move the horse race numbers over the next number of days or weeks. It's to solve the national housing crisis. The challenge that we're facing today has emerged over years and in some ways decades, and it's going to take some time to solve. I think before Canadians show in significant numbers that they are going to have faith that the housing crisis will in fact be solved, they're going to need to see progress. Now, we've got some encouraging numbers that we've seen coming in different parts of the country with an uptick in housing measures, housing starts, in jurisdictions that have partnered with us to put measures in place to accelerate the pace of home building. We've also got measures that are going to create opportunities for people to save up to get into the market and to build more affordable housing for low-income families. But some of these measures are going to take a little bit of time to manifest so we can demonstrate that progress. It's going to provide relief that has disproportionately impacted a younger generation of Canadians who feel priced out of the market.
Mm-hmm. I want to pick up on that because the Conservatives do say that housing will remain unaffordable under your government. And to back up that argument, they're pointing to a CMHC report that says housing starts are expected to be less in 2024 than 2021. I know you're making the argument that things are making their way through the system, but are they wrong there, that we're going to have less in this year than we did 3 years ago?
So 3 years ago was the highest rate of home building that we had in many decades. It was at the high water mark, and we've seen a slight decrease over the last couple of years as a result of the higher interest rate. Now, we have seen this year already a 16% increase compared to last year. So this year we're starting to trend in the right direction. And the report that you're referring to doesn't fully contemplate the measures that were included in the recent housing plan. So when you factor in the tax measures that will make it cheaper to build homes, the low-cost financing that will get more projects off the shelf and shovels in the ground, and additional measures that are going to make it easier to build homes as a result of the municipal changes that we've incentivized through the Housing Accelerator Fund, I have faith that we're going to be able to reverse that trend. But it may take a little bit of time. But we're not trying to simply put measures in place that will look good in the newspapers tomorrow. We're trying to solve a generational challenge. It may take a little bit of time, but I have faith that the plan that we've put in place is going to get us there.
Okay, you say generational challenge. You've said it more than once, but as you know, we saw this social media video put out by the Conservative leader at the end of last year. It addressed the housing crisis, and one of the opening lines that Pierre Poilievre uses is that there's now an entire generation of young people who believe they will never be able to afford a home. And when you look again at this Leger poll, 46% of 18 to 34-year-olds would vote Conservative right now, and only 17% would vote for your party. I know your party's latest budget talks about making things more fair across generations, but have you lost this current generation because you didn't take action sooner?
Look, in my own view, I certainly think we could have moved faster, moved bigger, moved sooner, but that doesn't give an excuse not to do everything that we can right now. You know, for a short while longer, I'm one of the few cabinet ministers who remains in his 30s, and everybody I talk to, my age and younger, feels that there is real challenges. There's real anxiety out there, and we need to do more to address it. That's why you would have seen such an increase in the pace of housing policies that we've been implementing over the past number of months. We believe that every generation deserves a fair shot to get into the housing market if that's what they wish. That's why we've created new opportunities for tax-free savings accounts for young people who are seeking to buy their first home. It's why we're aggressively pursuing measures that are going to make it easier and faster to build homes. We need to show progress. We owe it to a generation of young Canadians who feel priced out of the market to demonstrate that they have a place in the housing market if that's what they wish. I understand the very real anxiety that people are facing with the rising cost of living, including the rising cost of housing, and we're doing everything we can to address it. We can't do it alone, but when I actually compare the plans the different parties are putting on the table, it's no contest. The Conservatives' plan is to pull the government out of the housing space. They want to raise taxes by putting the GST back on the construction of new middle-class homes. They want to cut funding to cities who are trying to implement the kinds of reforms that are actually going to make it easier to build homes, and they have no measures to incentivize the industry to produce more homes or to help low-income families have a roof over their head if they can't afford a place in the market. So we're going to do everything that we can to do right by a generation of young people who've been disproportionately impacted by the pandemic and its impact on the housing market in Canada. It's going to take a little bit of time to see the progress that I want to see, but we are well underway with a plan that's going to have a meaningful and positive impact.
Okay, I hear what you're saying, but you know, Conservatives, and you know this, they focused on you. In fact, they have called you, and forgive me for this is their word, not mine, they call you incompetent. They blame in part your tenure as immigration minister for some of the challenges we're now facing on housing. When you make these arguments, they are questioning whether or not Canadians can trust you to actually deliver. How do you answer that?
I'm not asking people to trust any promise from a politician. I'm asking them to review the plan, compare it to the different plans that are on the table, and you'll see that ours is far more ambitious and far more aggressive. With respect to the allegations around immigration that people lobby at me, look, people want to say what's ever in their political interest. I remain very proud of some of the things that we were able to achieve, to do right by Afghans who serve with the Canadian Armed Forces, to welcome Ukrainians who were fleeing an invasion by Russia. There were some challenges that we faced as multiple cohorts came to Canada at once as the borders reopened after a few years, and Canada became the #1 place in the world that people wanted to come and live and work. There's some lessons we've learned about how to better cooperate with provincial governments to help prevent abuses in the student program, for example, that we're now implementing to help address some of those challenges. But when people are actually comparing plans, I think they'll see that they shouldn't just trust what any politician is saying. They should look at the plans. I think democracy demands a healthy dose of skepticism over the promises made by political parties, but it also demands that people give an honest comparison of what's being proposed. When I look at the ideas we're putting on the table, the plans that we're implementing, the policies that are actually going forward and having an impact already, you're going to see a very clear division as to who's got the real ambition to solve the housing crisis.
You know, Minister, I appreciate you answering those questions, but before you go, I also want to ask you about what happened in the House of Commons yesterday. Mr. Poilievre was expelled, but based on the exchanges there, it's obvious that the official opposition have issues with the Speaker essentially not trusting his judgment. Can Mr. Fergus really continue in that role if he cannot command the confidence of the House?
So first on your question, and then maybe on the events of yesterday, if any member of any party disregards the ruling of the Speaker and shows disrespect to the orders the Speaker gives, that's not just a disrespect to the individual, it's a disrespect to the institution. My view is that the decision taken by the Speaker he was put in a very challenging position, but I don't think it was right for any member, Mr. Poilievre, Ms. Harder, or anyone else, to openly defy the Speaker or to walk out of the House of Commons. I don't think it's appropriate behaviour, and I think Canadians should demand a higher degree of professionalism and frankly, should demand politicians behave like adults. For my part, I've been reflecting on how we talk to one another. I fear that we've created a situation around our politics where we're inclined just to seek out people with whom we already agree, and it breeds a culture where we more often seek to confirm our biases rather than challenge our perspectives. It's not healthy. We need to work together, particularly where we disagree with one another, for the betterment of our communities, for the betterment of Canadians. I think that's something that we all owe our constituents, because I can tell you, back home, nobody elected me to call the other guy names. They elected me to go to work for them. I think if we would all remember that, we'd all be better served with the time that we have here and the privilege we have to serve our communities in the House of Commons.
Minister Sean Fraser, thank you for the time this evening.
Pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, what we heard from the minister aside, Conservative complaints about the Speaker is among the other things that happened in politics today.
Should Greg Fergus stay on as Speaker?
He should resign.
How come?
Well, I think the Speaker should resign. He's a disgrace.
He should have resigned after he lost the confidence vote of the two real opposition parties, the Bloc and the NDP, and us, where the NDP is in a coalition with the government. Several months ago, he lost the confidence of the opposition then. He certainly lost it yesterday.
Several Conservative MPs calling for Greg Fergus's resignation today on their way into a caucus meeting. Their calls follow the Speaker's decision yesterday to eject their party leader Pierre Poilievre out of question period after he declined to withdraw a comment that was deemed unparliamentary. Meanwhile, other party leaders are urging for calm in the House and are supporting the Speaker's decision to remove Poilievre.
It shows the character of the Conservative leader, Pierre Poilievre, a coward, not someone who's willing to accept responsibility for their actions.
We've been pleading with friends on all sides of the House to pull back from taking this degree of deep partisanship and really dangerous levels of escalation of partisanship on all sides, to pull back, to step up, and to do what Canadians expect of us.
And a quick note in Ontario today as the provincial government announced a new program aimed at getting more young people into the skilled trades. The focused accelerated skills training program will allow grade 11 and 12 students to use up to 80% of their school time training for a trade.
But for us to achieve the prosperity we want, it means that we have to build critical infrastructure. To do this, we need more Ontarians in the skilled trades. In fact, we're going to need 500,000 over the coming decade.
Education Minister Stephen Lecce and Labour Minister David Piccini pitched the plan, acknowledging a high demand for these skills as all three levels of government try to get more homes and infrastructure built. Well, to Canada's energy sector now, as today is a big day. The long-awaited Trans Mountain expansion began operating the 1,000-kilometre pipeline running from Edmonton to Burnaby in British Columbia. Now, the feds bought the pipeline from Kinder Morgan in 2018. This was to ensure the project happened, and despite some delays, some cost overruns, here we are. And to talk about it, we're joined by the Alberta Premier Danielle Smith. Premier, thank you for joining us again.
My pleasure.
Now, you're on record as saying that today's development is a game changer. What do you mean by that?
In a couple of different ways. I mean, at the political level, one of the things that we should have confidence in is that Canada can complete major, large industrial nation-building projects. I think that should give us some encouragement. It also shows that you can have federal-provincial cooperation in even different political parties pushing towards the same goal. I mean, I think that also should give some investor confidence. But from a dollars and cents point of view, This increases our ability to export Canadian crude internationally, which will allow us to get new customers, which will allow us to get better prices. That not only helps Alberta, but it also helps the federal government as well with the extra corporate and personal income taxes they'll be able to generate. So I'm very encouraged by the fact that First Oil is beginning to run through that line.
Okay, I'm going to get to the cooperation a little bit later, but on this point of celebrating this official start, as I noted, there were some cost overruns here. It took longer to build than initially thought, and as a result, oil companies who want to use TMX will be charged tolls that I guess are higher than what they want to pay. Will that affect the success of the pipeline and the economic benefits that you're pointing to?
I don't think so. I mean, I've seen some economic analysis that suggests that there's about 80% of the pipeline that is currently debt financed, and that will continue. And the tolls that are going to be paid will pay the majority of that debt off. And then in addition to that, there'll be an equity stake. Ultimately, when the government sells it, there'll be a smaller portion that goes into share purchase. And I hope they're able to get a First Nation equity partnership. I think that would be really important. So I think the first step is that it looks to me like taxpayers will not be on the hook for this. And I think that's important in order to have public support for this major project. But secondly, yes, the tolls are going to be a little bit higher, but guess what? The amount of dollars that the companies are going to be able to get from the higher sale price of the oil is going to be important too. I've heard, when you look at what has happened in Canada, because we only had one customer, the United States, whenever we got bottlenecked, our oil prices would shrink. So we would go down and have a difference of about, I think it got to as high as $40 below West Texas Intermediate. That differential is now narrowed and it's going to continue to narrow. So they'll be able to sell their product at a much higher price than they were able to with only having one customer, the Americans. So I would say, yeah, maybe the tolls are a little bit higher, but in the end, I think it's going to be worth it for everyone. It's a win all around.
Okay. Now, of course, you pointed to the government cooperation that allowed this pipeline to actually, the expansion of it to actually be completed. And the federal government is being criticized, has been criticized for investing in TMX despite pursuing, an environmental program on the other side. You thanked Justin Trudeau for getting this project done. Does that mean you appreciate the kind of a political tightrope that the Prime Minister has to walk on the issue between oil development and the environment?
It's quite remarkable, really, because the federal government, even though they've been perceived as being anti-pipeline, they have also permitted and seen 2 pipelines get built under their watch. So not just this one, but also the Coastal GasLink, which I think points to a pragmatism that understands that as an international energy producer with international importance, we've got to make sure that we're supporting our friends and neighbors and allies. And that became even more important in the last several years. So I appreciate the pragmatism. It can't have been easy to navigate the constant increases in demand to fund this project through the finance ministry, and the fact that they stuck with it and got it to the finish line, I think, is important. No one could have known when this started back in 2013 that it couldn't get done without the federal government buying it. No one could have known when they took it over that we would end up with the war, the Russian invasion of Ukraine, as well as all of the turmoil in the Middle East. But I think it is demonstrating why it is Canada needs to be an important partner and player on the international scene. So I hope people understand that the world does need more Canada, and that this is a very encouraging project, and we should do more of them.
What do you say to environmentalists, though, who have never really dropped their concerns about TMX, be it extracting the oil from the ground and or transporting it across so many kilometers on a pipeline going into environmentally sensitive areas in some cases? What do you say to those environmentalists?
Well, one thing I would say is one of our new customers is going to be India, and India has an energy poverty problem. They need to bring their people up to a standard of living all across their country that we're able to enjoy in Canada. And I think that's an important dual goal that we have. The second thing is our Pathways group, the 6 major oil sands producers, have partnered in an alliance to build a CO2 pipeline with carbon sequestration so that they can be carbon neutral by 2050. They take that seriously. They want to be the best barrel out there on the market so that they'll be the last barrel if there is a last barrel. And so I think people should be encouraged that the environmentalists, the message was heard. This is what they're hearing from their shareholders. This is what they're hearing from their customers. They've taken it seriously, and they've embarked on a really ambitious project to make that happen. And I guess the third thing is that The benefit that we have of this heavier type of crude is it can be turned into a number of different products, including asphalt. And whether you're driving a combustion engine vehicle or a zero emissions vehicle, you're going to need roads to drive them on. And if we're able to reduce the emissions in the production and then not be combusting it because we're laying it on the road for asphalt, that should allow for environmentalists to see that increasingly this is a construction material. It's going to be less emissions, and our companies in our province are very serious about reaching that carbon neutral target.
Mm-hmm. So as we said, a big day on many cases when it comes to TMX. But before you go, talking about the Prime Minister, you have called for a First Minister's meeting on the carbon tax. I'm wondering where that stands right now.
We have not heard a positive response from the Prime Minister. He said that he met with the premiers back in 2016. Unfortunately, I don't think there's any premier currently at the table that was at the table back in 2016. And the rules changed. I mean, when the Prime Minister first got buy-in on this, he was talking about a carbon price that would not exceed $50 per ton. It's now up to $80 per ton. It's going up to $170 per ton. And people are already feeling the pinch of that. So I have told him that I think the point was made. People understand that the tax is there, but it can't keep on going up like this. It's just too hard on people. I think he would have done well to avoid doing the increase on April the 1st. And at this point, I think he needs to roll it back. Our position is we'd like to see it gone altogether, because I believe that the real emissions reduction is going to happen on the things like I just talked about, the industrial emissions, pathways. We're doing net zero petrochemicals, net zero hydrogen, net zero cement. Those are the ways in which we can offer new choices to consumers rather than just punishing them. The sad part about the carbon tax is right now, there just isn't any way to avoid it, because the transition hasn't taken place. The alternatives aren't available. They're not readily available. And that's why it's causing such a pinch. There just isn't any way to avoid that tax.
Well, we continue to watch to see what happens on that file. But again, for today, Premier Smith, thank you for making yourself available.
Thank you.
Well, national dental care is officially here, a key tenet of the government's supply and confidence agreement with the NDP. The deal to create the Canadian Dental Care Plan was announced back in December. And according to government officials, 1.9 million seniors who are the first to qualify have already signed up. But here's the problem. Only a few thousand dentists reportedly are on board right now to take up the program, and immediately that puts into question the future success of national dental care. Joining us now is Dr. Joel Antel. He is the president of the Canadian Dental Association. Dr. Antel, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate the opportunity.
So as we said, this is the first day of the National Dental Care Program. But, even ahead of today, we've been watching this debate go back and forth between dentists and Ottawa. And, I've read statements attributed to you in which you say dentists still don't have enough information from the government. What kind of information is still lacking here?
At this point, to take part in the program, dentists have to become party to a very long technical list of terms and conditions, some of which haven't been finalized, some of which haven't been clarified, and they really need that information before deciding.
So need that information before deciding, and is that for fear that they won't get paid or that they might end up spending hours and hours on administration?
The paying part is not the concern. It's the administrative burden that comes along with it, and the difficulty in when we're dealing with our patients of keeping the focus on the patient-dentist relationship and determining the correct patient treatment rather than getting into the terms and conditions as part of the treatment planning process.
Terms and conditions, as you say. And it's interesting because I was reading this article that quoted the health minister, Mark Holland, and he said for dentists who have concern that the process, the administration might become too onerous, he encourages them to at least try with one patient to identify any issues they may or may not have. What do you make of that suggestion?
The issue isn't the difficulty of signing up. We're all computerized. It's very easy to do. The concern is that they asked us to sign on to a contract that is open-ended with parts that haven't been finalized, and the government having the right to change the contract at any time without them having committed to negotiating or discussing it with us first. They've come up with an alternative pathway for taking place, which is this process of just sending in a claim. what dentists have to understand is that when you send in that claim, that is accepting all the terms and conditions that you would have accepted had you signed the contract. So it's just another path to the same end, not a different pathway.
Do you think the government's not being forthright enough with dentists?
We've been working with the government almost from the beginning of this to try and help their program be the best program it can for Canadian patients. And our conversations have been very civil and very productive. We haven't always been in agreement. I would not want to characterize the government as being at odds with us. We just have a long way to go yet before we can make this thing totally workable the way it has to be. So it works for government, it benefits the patients that come into dental offices, and it's sustainable in dental offices.
Now, you have, and your association has, raised concerns about patients under a public program also not really understanding what they're actually eligible to receive. Do you see that as a government failure to properly inform Canadians about what this program will or will not cover before rolling it out?
I think the public messaging could be better because people are walking into our offices very uninformed, and most dentists are already, even though they're not participating in the program, they're still having onerous conversations with many, many patients where dentists or dental office staff are being taken away from patient care to have to explain to the patients the misconceptions that they've heard. The government has done a very good job of putting the correct information on the government website where if someone knows it's there and goes looking for it, they can find it. But the public messaging that the people hear through active media, the radio, the TV, that messaging could be a lot clearer and a lot more accurate.
Mm-hmm. Now, I'm wondering what type of timeline do you think this is going to take? Because as we said right off top, 1.9 million Canadians have already signed up, and that's just the first cohort. So when you think of only a few thousand dentists now involved in the program, what type of wait time is there going to be for people to actually receive national dental care, do you think?
Unfortunately, it's not going to be a wait time as much as it's going to be a very difficult process to find someone who's actually working in the program. And if someone already has a dentist of record, they may have to change dentists because they won't have their choice of dentist. They'll have to change to somebody who is participating in the program. For timeline, I'm very hopeful that we can wrap this up very quickly. Certainly, the closer the government makes this so that their program is like private dental insurance, the faster we can wrap this up. I don't think we're looking long term. Maybe I'm being overly optimistic, but I hope that's how it's going to play out.
So at the end of the day, you think national dental care will be a success?
I think it's going to be with us for a very long time. How big an impact it has is how good the program becomes after all the tinkering is done.
Dr. Joel Antel, I appreciate the time and you taking it away from your patients to have a conversation with us this evening. Thank you for this.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate that.
And that is our program for this Wednesday. I'm Michael Serapio. For everyone here at CPAC, thank you for watching. We'll be back tomorrow evening. Until then, have a good night.